We walk around with this very confident map of reality in our heads. We have gravity, we have smartphones, we have the laws of physics. We like to think we know how the machine works.
But then you get these things that just refuse to fit on the map.
The weird stuff, the
The
glitches.
things that usually get laughed out of the room.
Exactly. And usually we handle that by putting up a wall. Science lives on one side and ghost stories live on the other. But today's deep dive is gonna smash that wall down.
I like the sound of that.
We're looking at a stack of research centering on the work of Zach Martin and the history of New Age philosophy that argues something really radical.
Which is?
It suggests that the way we talk about the unexplainable, specifically the shift from the word supernatural to paranormal, wasn't just a vocabulary update.
It was rebranding.
It was a calculated rebranding campaign to try and force magic to submit to the laws of science.
It's a fascinating premise. It's really the story of how humanity tried to colonize the unknown. We tried to take the things that terrified us and turn them into just another branch of physics.
So let's start there with that linguistic mystery, because I think most people, and I'd include myself here, use supernatural and paranormal almost as synonyms.
Yeah, interchangeably.
If I see a ghost in a movie, it's supernatural. If I watch a documentary about ghost hunters, it's paranormal. Is there actually a structural difference?
According to the source material, the difference is massive. It represents a complete overhaul of our worldview. You have to go back to before the mid-19th century.
Okay.
Back then, if you saw a ghost or had a prophetic dream or a miraculous healing, that was supernatural. And that prefix is key. Super means above.
Above nature.
Right. These events were considered to be completely outside the jurisdiction of the physical world. They were divine or demonic or spiritual. They just operated on a different plane of existence.
So science didn't even need to bother with them. You don't use a ruler to measure a miracle.
It's a category error.
Yeah.
Exactly. Supernatural basically meant science, stay out. This isn't your department.
Okay, so that makes sense. But then things change.
Then we hit the late 1800s, the Victorian era. The Industrial Revolution is exploding. We're mastering steam, electricity, engineering. The scientific mindset is just taking over the globe.
And suddenly that no trespassing sign on reality isn't good enough anymore.
Precisely. The intellectual elite wanted to explain everything, so they coined a new term, paranormal.
And para means beside.
Beside or alongside. Think paralegal or paramedic. By switching to paranormal, these early researchers were making a massive claim. They were saying, these aren't miracles from God.
They're natural events.
They're natural events that exist alongside the ones we already know. They're just phenomena we haven't figured out the equation for yet.
That is a subtle but absolutely huge shift. It turns a ghost from a spirit into a physics problem?
Exactly. It implies that telepathy, hauntings, clairvoyance, they're all just mental forces.
Yeah.
Like radio waves or electricity. The belief was that if we just applied enough scientific rigor, we would eventually find the laws of ghosts, just like we found the laws of gravity.
An attempt to secularize the mystical.
That's the perfect phrase for it.
Which brings us to the core conflict that Martin highlights. You've got this rational science that just abhors a vacuum, it hates not knowing things, and then you have this stubborn human experience of high strangeness that just refuses to go away.
And the source paints this picture of the late 19th century that is just dripping with arrogance. Think about the context. In a single generation, we went from candles to light bulbs, from horses to cars.
From letters to telephones.
Right.
If I'm living in 1900, I'm seeing impossible things happen every single day. If I can talk to my cousin in Chicago through a piece of copper wire, which would have been basically black magic 50 years earlier, why couldn't I talk to him with my mind?
That was exactly the logic. They thought they were on the brink of a theory of everything. They honestly believed that within, say, 20 or 30 years, they would either prove psychic phenomena with physics or they debunk it entirely.
They thought the scientific method was the ultimate solvent. It would just clean up all the messy edges of reality.
So they went to work.
They took the ghosts out of the haunted castles and put them into
the lab. And this is where the story moves from philosophy to hard data. We have to talk about J.B. Rhine.
Right, the pivotal figure here.
J.B. Rhine at Duke University in the 1930s. He wasn't interested in campfire stories or mediums holding hands in the dark. He wanted math. He wanted statistical proof.
And this is where those famous Zener cards come in, right? The ones everyone knows from pop culture. The star, the squiggly lines.
Yes, 5 symbols. Star, circle, square, cross, wavy lines. It's a test of pure probability. If I hold up a card and you guess what it is, you have a 1 in 5 chance. 20%.
So if I guess 100 times, I should get about 20 right just by luck?
Correct. And if you do it thousands and thousands of times, that average should stay rock solid at 20%. That's the baseline of chance.
But that's not what he found.
Not at all. He found people who consistently scored significantly higher than 20%, and this is maybe even more interesting, people who scored significantly lower.
Wait, hold on. Why does scoring lower matter? If I get 0 right, doesn't that just mean I'm really bad at it?
You'd think so, but in a random probability game, scoring consistently below chance is just as impossible as scoring above it.
How?
Well, if you're guessing blindly, you're going to accidentally hit 20%. If you're hitting 0% or 5% over thousands of tries, it implies you unconsciously know the right answer, and you are actively avoiding it. It's called psi missing.
Wow. So either way, something is happening.
Something is happening. Ryan ran tens of thousands of trials, and the statistics screamed that this wasn't luck. He called it psychic agency.
Okay, so here is where I get stuck. If he followed the rules, he did the math, he used the scientific method, he had the data, why aren't we learning about J.B. Ryan in high school physics class alongside Newton and Einstein?
Right. Why did the scientific community just slam the door in his face?
Yeah.
This is the Newtonian blockage. It wasn't that his math was bad.
No.
The math was impeccable. It was that his results were, for lack of a better word, illegal.
Illegal according to whom? The science police.
According to Isaac Newton.
Mm.
See, the dominant view of the universe at the time was purely materialist. Everything is matter bumping into other matter, and physical forces obey specific laws. The big one here is the inverse square law.
I vaguely remember that from school. Sound gets quieter the further away you are, light gets dimmer.
Exactly. Radio signals get static, gravity gets weaker. That is a fundamental law of nature, right? Distance degrades the signal, energy spreads out and dissipates.
But that's not what happened with telepathy.
Ryan found that telepathy didn't care about distance. 2 people in the same room, high score. 2 people 1,000 miles apart, same score.
Whoa. So no signal degradation at all.
None. And that terrified the physicists.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't get weaker with distance, it's not a wave. It's not energy as they understood it. It broke the model of space.
And then you add precognition predicting the card before it's flipped.
Which implies information traveling backwards in time, which breaks the model of time. Cause has to precede effect. If the effect happens before the cause, the whole machine just falls apart.
It's like watching an apple fall up.
It is. So faced with data that broke the laws of physics, the scientific community didn't say, wow, we need new physics. They said, the data must be wrong.
Even though it wasn't.
The source quotes a Dr. George Price from the University of Minnesota, and this quote is just devastatingly honest. He said, not 1,000 experiments with 10 million trials could persuade me.
He actually admitted that. He basically said he was immune to evidence.
He did. He reasoned that it's safer to doubt the data, even perfect data, than to abandon the fundamental laws of nature that all of science was built on. It's the ultimate irony, really.
Scientists refusing to be scientific because the answer made them too uncomfortable.
It's the definition of dogma. They treated Newton's laws like religious scripture. But, the joke was on them, because while the psychologists and biologists were fighting to defend Newtonian physics,
The physicists themselves were about to blow it all up.
exactly, enter quantum mechanics.
The game changer.
Totally. In the early 20th century, physics went subatomic. And suddenly, Newton's rules just didn't apply anymore. The universe stopped looking like a clockwork machine and started looking like, well, magic.
This is the part that always melts my brain.
It should. It's bizarre. Quantum mechanics introduced non-locality, the idea that particles can be entangled and affect each other instantly across vast distances faster than light.
Einstein hated that. He called it spooky action at a distance.
He did. And that spooky action sounds suspiciously like what Ryan was seeing with the cards, doesn't it?
It's exactly that.
The physicists were discovering that at the deepest level of reality, the inverse square law doesn't apply. Space and time aren't these rigid containers. The source argues that quantum mechanics finally gave paranormal phenomena a permission structure to exist.
So it's not that ghosts or telepathy are breaking the laws of physics. It's that we were using the wrong rule book.
We were trying to explain quantum events with Newtonian rules.
Right.
The source discusses this concept of the universe as a hologram.
Mm-hmm.
In a hologram, every tiny piece of the film contains the image of the whole thing. It's all interconnected. If the universe is a web of consciousness or information, then distance is basically an illusion.
That shifts the whole debate. It goes from, is the brain a machine that produces consciousness, to, is consciousness the fundamental stuff the universe is made of? That's the quantum shift. The old materialist view is that the brain creates the mind, like a generator creates electricity. When the generator stops, the light goes out.
But the new view,
The new view, supported by things like this hologram concept, is that the brain is more like a receiver, tuning into a signal that is everywhere.
okay, so we have the theory, we have the history, but I want to ground this because, frankly, most of us aren't doing Zener card tests or splitting atoms. How does this actually show up in real life?
Well, the source brings up something it calls the skeptic's paradox, which I found really, really relatable.
Oh, this is brilliant.
It is. It shines a light on the fact that we often believe things behaviorally that we deny intellectually.
It's the rebranding thing again, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you walk into a corporate boardroom and say, I have a psychic vision that this merger is bad, security is escorting you out of the building, you're unstable.
But if you walk in and say, my gut instinct tells me this is off, or I'm just using my intuition, everyone nods. Oh, great business acumen. He has a nose for the market.
It's the same mechanic. We just gave it a suit and tie.
We did. We've been trained to shame the word psychic, but praise the word instinct. But the source argues they are the exact same data stream.
There's a specific experiment mentioned in the text, the keepsake experiment, that really drove this home for me. I'd love for you to walk us through that because it totally trapped me.
It traps everyone. So here's the setup. You find a hardcore skeptic, someone who says psychometry is garbage.
And just to clarify, psychometry is the idea that an object can hold the energy or history of its owner.
Right. The skeptic says, that's magical thinking. An object is just atoms. Carbon, metal, glass. It has no memory.
Okay, fair enough. That's the rational view.
So then you ask them, do you have a keepsake from a deceased loved one? Maybe your grandfather's watch or a ring from a parent. And they usually say yes. Then you say, okay, imagine I have a machine. I can take that watch and replicate it down to the atomic level. I will give you a brand new, identical watch. It looks the same, weighs the same, tells time perfectly, maybe even better than the old one. Will you trade your grandfather's watch for the replica?
Oof. Immediately, my gut says no. No way.
Okay.
Because it's not his watch.
But if it's just atoms, what's the difference? The replica is physically superior, it's new, but almost everyone refuses to trade.
Because we feel like the original has him. It has his essence.
Exactly. We act as if psychometry is real. We treat the object as if it contains the soul of the person, even though our logical brain says that's impossible. That is the paradox. Our behavior betrays our belief that matter is more than just matter.
We're all closet mystics. We just pretend we aren't.
And the stats back that up. The source says 60 to 70% of people admit to believing in ESP. But even the non-believers, they'll admit to things like the twin connection.
Where twins feel each other's pain.
Or just the feeling of being stared at from behind.
Oh, the sense of being stared at is a big one. You turn around and someone is looking right at you.
Logically, that shouldn't happen. I-beams aren't real. But we all accept it, It's like a survival mechanism.
So, if this ability is natural and we're all doing it to some degree, are there people using it professionally? The source highlights business, police, and medicine.
The business angle is surprisingly robust. There was research done by Dr. Douglas Dean at the Newark College of Engineering. He studied top executive CEOs who had a track record of doubling profits.
The heavy hitters.
The heavy hitters.
Yeah.
And he found a direct correlation between high performance and a reliance on precognition.
They didn't call it precognition, though, did they?
Oh no, they called it flashes of inspiration or a hunch. But Dr. Dean found that when these CEOs had to make a decision with insufficient data, which is most high-level decisions, they relied on a leap. That leap is the psychic undercurrent.
It's fascinating that if they admitted how they made the decision, their stock would probably crash. The CEO is hearing voices.
But because they mask it as acumen, they get a bonus. It's the ultimate don't ask, don't tell.
And what about the police? I mean, I always see TV shows about psychic detectives, but does that happen in the real world?
It does, but it's very hush-hush. The author of our source material actually shares a personal story about working with Scotland Yard.
Oh, wow. Actual Scotland Yard.
On murder cases and missing persons, yes. And the tension wasn't about whether it worked. The tension was all PR. The police press office was terrified that the public would find out.
They thought people would riot, right? They're burning taxpayer money on voodoo.
That was the fear. But eventually, the story leaked to a London newspaper. The police braced for impact. and nothing happened.
No riots.
Actually, the opposite. The public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People said, good, you should be trying everything to catch the killer. Who cares if it's psychic? Just solve the case.
That is so telling. The institutions are the ones who are scared of the stigma. The actual people just want results.
It goes right back to that skeptic's paradox. We pretend to be rigid rationalists, but deep down we are pragmatic. If it works, we use it.
And that leads us to medicine. This seems like the area where the shift is most visible right now.
Yes, we're moving toward evidence-based medicine. And that sounds strict, but it's actually opening doors. It just asks, does the patient get better?
Right.
If acupuncture helps the patient, the doctor uses it, even if they can't fully explain chai or meridians.
And we're seeing the breakdown of that body as a machine metaphor.
That's the key. For a long time, doctors were mechanics. The body was a car. Replace the part, fix the pump, change the fluids. But now we know about the mind-body connection. We know stress, a thought, can crash the immune system, a physical reality.
Which was fringe science not that long ago.
Very fringe, now it's standard. We were starting to see the body as an intelligence, not just a machine. It responds to consciousness. Visualizing health can actually improve health. That's mind over matter, literally.
So, zooming out, where is this all going? The source warns against the arrogance of scientism. And I like that distinction, science versus scientism.
It's a crucial distinction. Science is a method of inquiry. It asks questions. Scientism is a belief system, a dogma that says, we already know how the world works, and anything that doesn't fit our current model is fake.
Like that guy in the 19th century, Ernst Haeckel, who said we'd solved all the riddles of the universe?
Right. He claimed we had solved 6 of the 7 world riddles, and the 7th wasn't real. It's just hubris. Every time we think we've finished the puzzle, we find a new piece that doesn't fit. Dark matter, dark energy, consciousness itself.
We still have no idea how a firing neuron creates the sensation of the color red.
None. So it seems like we're moving towards what the source calls a softer science, a convergence.
How so?
As technology gets better, AI, brain scanning, quantum computing, we're operating at the micro level, the level where the old Newtonian laws break down and the quantum laws take over.
The realm where mind and matter interact. The source calls the human mind the laboratory of the new physics.
Which is such an empowering thought, isn't it? We aren't just passive observers in a dead universe. We are active participants in a living web.
It feels like a shift from accumulating knowledge to seeking wisdom.
That's the perfect way to frame it. Knowledge is knowing the mechanics. Wisdom is understanding the connection. You know, the source quotes Sogyal Rinpoche, noting that our society is incredibly clever. We have smartphones and space stations, but we lack wisdom. We know the how, but we've lost the why.
So for the listener who has been with us on this journey, from Victorian ghosts to quantum holograms, what's the takeaway? Are we saying everyone needs to go out and buy a crystal ball?
No, please don't. The point isn't that we are all about to become X-Men. The point is that these abilities, intuition, a hunch, that sense of things, they aren't superpowers. They're natural. They are part of the standard operating system of a human being.
It's that psychic undercurrent.
Exactly. It's the little tug you feel when you meet someone new and your stomach drops, even though they're smiling. It's the sudden urge to call your mom and she picks up on the first ring. It's the hesitation that makes you take a different route to work, avoiding an accident.
And we usually just ignore those signals. We tell ourselves we're being silly. We suppress them with logic.
And the argument here is, stop ignoring them. You are throwing away valuable data. You're operating with one hand tied behind your back because you're afraid of looking irrational.
That is a lot to process, but it's a liberating idea. It means we don't have to choose between science and intuition. We can have both.
It invites us to be a little more whole, to integrate the rational and the intuitive.
So, here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on today. We pride ourselves on being logical creatures. We make pros and cons lists. We look at the specs. We analyze the spreadsheets. But if the source material is right, if the universe is fundamentally information and your mind is plugged into that web, I want you to look back at your last big decision. Did you really choose that job or that partner or that house because of the logical list? Or did you make the decision in a split second based on a feeling you couldn't explain and then use logic afterwards to justify it to your friends? How much of your rational life is actually being steered by that quiet, intuitive pilot that you've been trained to ignore? Maybe it's time to start trusting your own inner technology.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.